My name is Lauren Mitchell, and I never thought my life would look like one of those messy dramas you only see in movies. But it did. It all started on a warm Saturday afternoon in Dallas, Texas, the kind of day where the sun feels a little too bright, and you just know something is about to go wrong. I had just finished my shift at the hospital. Being a nurse meant long hours, sore feet, and a smile plastered on my face even when I felt like crying inside. But what kept me moving was the thought of going home to my little boy, Ethan. He was 7, full of questions, and the kind of kid who could turn a bad day into something worth living. My husband, Daniel, was supposed to pick him up from soccer practice that afternoon. But when I got to the field, Ethan was still waiting, his cleats digging into the grass, holding his backpack with that impatient, tired look kids get when they feel forgotten. "Mom, you're late too?" he called out, running toward me. I bent down and hugged him tight, kissing the top of his sweaty hair. "Hey, buddy, sorry, Daddy didn't come?" Ethan shook his head. "Nope, Coach said he never showed." "Can we just go home?" "I'm starving." I felt my stomach twist. Daniel wasn't the most reliable father in the world, but he usually showed up when it came to Ethan. Something didn't feel right. We drove home in silence, Ethan munching on the granola bar I handed him from the glove box. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, and when I glanced at the screen, I froze. It was a picture message from a number I didn't recognize. My hands shook as I opened it. It was Daniel, standing in front of the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, grinning ear to ear. And next to him, holding his arm like she belonged there, was a woman I had never seen before. She was tall, glamorous, with long black hair and a smirk that told me she knew exactly who she was hurting. The caption under the photo read, "Don't wait for me." I'm done pretending. My chest went cold. I couldn't even breathe. Ethan sat in the back seat humming along to the radio, blissfully unaware that his whole world had just shifted. When we pulled into the driveway, I sent Daniel a message. "Are you serious? You left your son at soccer practice to run off to Spain with some woman?" No reply. That night, after Ethan finally fell asleep, I sat in the living room staring at the wedding photos on the wall. The perfect smiles, the vows we once believed in, the promises he had made. All of it meant nothing now. Daniel had chosen Barcelona. He had chosen her. The next few weeks were a blur. Daniel didn't call, didn't text. The mortgage was still due, groceries had to be bought, bills piled up, and all of it was on me now. My friends tried to console me. My mom said, "Honey, you're stronger than you think." But I didn't feel strong. I felt abandoned, like garbage tossed to the side while he lived out some romantic fantasy in Europe. Then came the breaking point. Ethan came home from school one day holding a crayon drawing. "It's our family," he said proudly, showing me the 3 stick figures. Me, him, and a third figure he had scribbled with messy hands. "Who's that?" I asked gently. "That's Dad," he said, frowning. "But I put him far away because he doesn't live here anymore." "Does he?" My throat closed up. I forced a smile. "He loves you, baby. He's just confused right now." That night, when I finally lay in bed, something inside me shifted. The sadness burned away, replaced by something darker. Something sharper. Revenge wasn't a word I had ever considered before. But the more I thought about Daniel, his smug grin in that Barcelona photo, the more it clawed at me. He had humiliated me, left me with nothing, called me less than worthy without even saying it to my face. And then I whispered out loud into the darkness, "You'll regret this, Daniel." "I'll make sure of it. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Ethan, about showing him that his mother wasn't weak, that no one could break us and walk away untouched." The plan started forming in the quiet corners of my mind. I didn't know how yet, but I knew this. Daniel wasn't going to waltz back into my life after his European fantasy and think everything was fine. When he finally did return, months later, broken and desperate, I was ready. More ready than he could have ever imagined. 3 months passed. 3 long, painful months of silence from Daniel. By then, the shock had worn off. replaced with a steady burn of anger that lived in my chest like a second heartbeat. I had adjusted to life without him, sort of. I picked up extra shifts at the hospital, learned how to juggle bills, and leaned on my mom whenever things felt too heavy. Ethan asked fewer questions about his dad, but every now and then he'd slip. "Do you think Dad is bringing me something from Spain?" he asked one night while brushing his teeth. I had to bite back the truth. "Maybe, sweetheart. We'll see." But deep down, I knew Daniel wasn't thinking about Ethan, or me. He was living his fantasy life in Barcelona, parading his mistress around like some prize. Then, one Friday evening, just as I was serving Ethan mac and cheese for dinner, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I wiped my hands on a towel, opened the door, and my stomach dropped. Daniel. He stood there on the porch, hair a little longer, his once crisp suits replaced by a wrinkled shirt and jeans. He looked tired, older, like Barcelona hadn't been the dream he expected. His suitcase sat behind him, and for a second, I thought I was hallucinating. "Lauren," he said quietly, eyes flicking past me toward the sound of Ethan's laughter from the kitchen. "Can we talk?" I crossed my arms. "You've got some nerve showing up here." "I know," he muttered. "I made mistakes, big ones, but I want to fix things." Fix things? The audacity made me laugh, a sharp, bitter sound I barely recognized as my own. "Daniel, you abandoned your son. You ran off to Spain with another woman like we were just disposably. And now you're back on my doorstep acting like you forgot your keys?" His jaw clenched. "It wasn't like that." "Really?" I snapped. "Because that's exactly what it felt like." Before he could answer, Ethan's small voice cut through the tension. "Dad?" Daniel's face crumpled as Ethan ran to the door, dropping his spoon on the floor. He knelt down, arms wide, and Ethan hesitated only a second before hugging him. My chest tightened. That night, Daniel sat on the couch while Ethan chattered on about school, soccer, and his friends. I watched the scene with a mix of emotions, relief that Ethan had his father back, and fury that Daniel thought he could just walk back into our lives without consequences. When Ethan finally fell asleep, I cornered Daniel in the kitchen. "Why are you really here?" I demanded. His shoulders sagged. "It didn't work out. With her. I thought I wanted something different, but it was a mistake. I miss my family." I leaned against the counter, folding my arms tighter. "You don't get to just miss us after months of silence. You humiliated me, Daniel. You left me to pick up the pieces while you lived your European fantasy. And now you expect forgiveness?" His eyes darted away. "I don't expect anything. I want to try again. For Ethan. For us." I studied him carefully. He looked broken, desperate. But all I felt was a dangerous calm. This was the moment I had been waiting for. "Fine," I said softly. "You can stay. For now." He blinked, surprised. "Really?" "Yes," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But don't mistake my kindness for forgiveness. You'll see exactly what it feels like to be humiliated, Daniel. I'll make sure of it." He frowned, not understanding, but I just smiled and walked away. Over the next few weeks, Daniel tried hard to play the role of a husband again. He cooked dinner once in a while, helped Ethan with homework, even mowed the lawn like nothing had happened. To everyone else, it might have looked like we were healing, but inside, I was planning, quietly, patiently. I started documenting everything: his texts, his absence from Ethan's life, the bank withdrawals he had made while in Spain. I reached out to a lawyer, learned about custody laws, property division, and what it would take to make sure Daniel lost everything he once took for granted. At the same time, I made sure he felt comfortable, secure. I laughed at his jokes, cooked his favorite meals, and let him think maybe, just maybe, I was falling back into his arms, but in the shadows, the real story was unfolding. My revenge wasn't going to be a loud explosion. It was going to be slow, calculated, and devastating. The night I overheard him on the phone sealed it. He was in the garage whispering to someone. I caught only fragments. "Money? She doesn't know. Just give me time." That's when I knew. He hadn't changed. He never would, and when the right moment came, I would expose him, not just to me, but to Ethan, to his job, to the people who thought he was a respectable man. Daniel was about to learn what it felt like to lose everything, because revenge, I realized, isn't just about anger. It's about control. And this time, I was the one in control. Daniel thought he had slipped back into our lives as if nothing happened. To Ethan, he was Dad again, the man who cheered from the sidelines at soccer games, who tucked him into bed, who tried making Saturday morning pancakes but always burned them. To anyone outside our walls, we might have looked like a family trying to heal, but I knew better. I knew every smile he offered me was fake, every "I love you" rehearsed. And I knew the woman in Barcelona wasn't the first. She was just the one he finally got caught with. So I did what any woman who had been humiliated, abandoned, and left to struggle alone would do. I started planning the kind of revenge he'd never see coming. The first step was making him feel safe. That was easy. All I had to do was smile when he came home, laugh at his half-hearted jokes, and let him think I was softening. He wanted to believe I was weak, forgiving. He needed to believe it. So I played my role. But behind the scenes, I was documenting everything. I found his old emails, the ones where he had promised to wire money soon to his mistress in Barcelona. I pulled the bank statements, highlighted the hotel charges, the wire transfers, the shopping sprees. I even dug through our joint accounts and discovered he had drained nearly half our savings before he left. And then I visited a divorce attorney. Her name was Marissa, sharp as a blade and just as dangerous. When I told her everything, she leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against a yellow legal pad. "Lauren, you've got him exactly where you want him," she said. "Abandonment, infidelity, misuse of joint funds, it's all here. If you're ready, we can bury him." I nodded, but my heart raced. I don't just want a divorce, Marissa. I want him to feel what I felt. I want him to lose everything that matters to him. She gave me a slow smile. Then let's build the case of a lifetime. For the next month, I lived 2 lives. By day, I was the supportive wife, folding his laundry, letting him kiss me on the cheek. By night, I was the strategist, working with Marissa to set the trap. I collected phone records. I saved screenshots. I tracked his location when he worked late. And just as I suspected, Daniel couldn't keep his lies straight. One Friday, while he told me he was stuck at the office, I traced his phone to a bar downtown. Not with his Barcelona mistress, but with another woman. The rage that bubbled in me was almost unbearable, but I didn't confront him. Not yet. No, I needed him comfortable. I needed him blind. Meanwhile, I started rebuilding myself. I went to the gym, started running again, bought clothes that made me feel powerful. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw less of the broken woman he left behind and more of someone dangerous. Someone he should have never underestimated. Then came the night that changed everything. Daniel walked in late, reeking of whiskey, tie undone, mumbling about a client dinner. He collapsed onto the couch and fell asleep almost instantly. His phone buzzed on the coffee table, and I picked it up. No password change. Amateur move. The message glowed on the screen. "When are you leaving her? You promised me Barcelona wasn't the end." I stared at it, the words burning into me. Another mistress. Another lie. My decision hardened. The next morning, I made him pancakes, his favorite with blueberries. I smiled, poured him coffee, asked him about his plans for the day. He didn't notice how steady my hands were, how calm my voice sounded. He had no idea that in my purse, I carried copies of every piece of evidence Marissa and I had gathered. I wasn't just planning to divorce him. I was going to destroy his reputation, his finances, and his pride in one brutal stroke. And the best part? He wouldn't even see it coming until it was far too late. When Ethan hugged him before school, Daniel looked over his son's shoulder and mouthed, "Thank you," to me, as if I'd finally forgiven him. I smiled back sweetly. But inside, I whispered the truth. "This is just the beginning, Daniel. By the time I'm done, you'll wish you stayed in Barcelona." The week before I moved felt like the calm before a storm you could see rolling in from 1,000 miles away. I was not moving out of anger. I was moving with purpose. Every box I packed was a small promise. Every picture I put in a drawer was a memory I had decided to store away and never let him weaponize. Again, Marissa had been clinical, and kind in that exact way lawyers are when they know the law, will cut sharper than any angry speech. She filed for divorce and for temporary orders that would give me custody of Ethan while the case moved forward. We asked the court for immediate temporary support and for temporary sole possession of the house. We also requested an accounting of all joint funds and access to any accounts in both our names. It was all legal, all by the book. I watched her slide the stack of documents across the table and felt something like relief, a thin, hard thing that tasted like victory. "You ready for this?" she asked. I nodded. "I am." But legal filings alone were lockers that could be picked open with the right key. I needed more than petitions and subpoenas. I needed Daniel to feel the same sharp exposure I'd felt when he sent that photo from Barcelona. I wanted him to understand the weight of being publicly accountable. I wanted him to know what it was like to have other people look at him and see the truth. Marissa smiled, small and dangerous. "Then we do two things. First, we get the temporary orders in place so your bank can freeze the joint accounts and he can't run. Second, we stage the service. He needs to be served in front of people who matter to him." She meant his colleagues, his clients, the PTA, the men at the country club who nodded like he was one of them. Men who would talk. The court papers would be the wedge. The crowd would be the lever. I told Ethan we were taking him to a friend's birthday party on Saturday. He was thrilled. He loved parties and the promise of cupcakes. He did not need to know that the cupcakes were a prop. On Friday night, I stayed up packing a small overnight bag for myself and another one for Ethan. I made sure his favorite blanket was on top. I left a note for Daniel that said, in careful handwriting, "We are at my mom's. Call if you need to talk." I did not want to bait him. I wanted him to be comfortable and therefore vulnerable. I wanted him to walk right into the moment where everything changed. Saturday morning, Ethan skipped into the car with his backpack and his #1 soccer knee pads stuffed in a separate pocket. He hummed the theme from some cartoon show and asked if we could stop for donuts. I said yes. When I drove, I felt like I was steering 2 lives toward a single point. We arrived at the downtown hotel where Daniel's company was hosting a client appreciation brunch. It was ornate, all orchids and brass, people in slacks and seersucker leaning into small talk about markets and kids and the value of hard work. I watched Daniel the way you watch a person you used to love from far away. He was laughing at something a colleague said, gesturing with toast in hand. He looked ordinary. He looked harmless. Marissa had coordinated with a process server and with a woman from HR who was willing to help. She had also, quietly and carefully, sent a copy of our filings and a summary of the bank discrepancies to Daniel's supervisor. She did not ask for anything dramatic. She only asked them to be present for the service, to be witnesses. I walked in wearing a dress I had not bought to be noticed, but that somehow made me feel like I belonged to myself again. Ethan clutched my hand. He had no idea that the man he called Dad was about to be confronted in front of his peers. When Daniel saw us, his smile faltered for the fraction of a second before he caught himself and moved in to say hello. He introduced me as his wife. The room said the proper things. The brunch continued, plates clearing and conversations circling. Daniel attempted to be charming, to be the steady, dependable guy he wanted everyone to think he was. I let him. I wanted him to relax. Then Marissa tapped my shoulder and nodded toward the stage. The event's organizer called for attention and began to speak. I felt a coil tighten in my chest, but I kept my breathing steady. At the back of the room, a man in a plain suit walked forward with a corner of an envelope visible in his hand. He was a process server. He moved with practiced calm. When he reached Daniel, he said, in a voice that carried just enough, "Daniel Matthew Harris, you are served." He handed him the documents and a receipt for service. The room went quiet as a dropped plate. Daniel blinked. He fumbled with the stack like a man who had received bad news and was trying to make paper into an explanation. Someone in the front row asked what was happening. Daniel made a joke that fell flat. Then one of his colleagues cleared his throat and said, "Is that what I think it is?" It was not just a piece of paper anymore. I had made sure the packets included the bank records showing withdrawals to airlines, hotels, and to names that matched the accounts he had wired while he was supposed to be at work. I had included screenshots of the messages from Barcelona. I had included a summary of the months he had been absent. The physical documents were only the beginning. Marissa had also sent the same package to his supervisor with a short note asking for an internal review given the potential misuse of joint funds and the distraction it posed to client responsibilities. Daniel's face changed. His mouth went dry, the kind of dryness that comes when a person realizes the narrative they have relied on is not only unspooling, but also being read by others. People at the tables leaned in. Conversations died. 3 different phones flicked on, the screens bright with the first tweets and private texts. In one corner, a woman I recognized from the PTA whispered into her friend's ear. Another man shifted uncomfortably and tried to redirect a young client's attention. Daniel was trying to be someone else, someone blameless. For a single desperate moment, he looked at me like he might, after all, find mercy. Then he saw Ethan. His expression broke into 1,000 questions and no answer. Ethan looked up, confused, and the man who had promised to be his hero looked small. "Lauren," Daniel said, on the edge of begging, "what is this?" I smiled. It was a small, soft smile, one that did not need to explain. "It is what happens when you walk away," I said. "It is what happens when you choose yourself over your family," he tried to argue. He started talking about mistakes and being young and about wanting to fix things. People around us began to murmur. Some whispered, "Is he in trouble?" A senior partner who had once praised Daniel's networking skills sat stiff and unreadable. Within days, the temporary orders were granted. The bank complied, placing freezes on joint accounts so Daniel could not drain whatever he had left. His supervisor called him into HR for a meeting, and within a week he was suspended pending an internal inquiry into possible misuse of corporate expense accounts. The client who had been leaning on him for advice moved their account to someone else. The PTA mom who had winked at him at soccer pickup stopped returning his texts. It was not instantaneous annihilation. It was a series of small public rejections that accumulated like stones in a river until the current became impossible to swim against. That night, Daniel drove by the house and sat in his car, watching the porch light through the blinds. He did not come in. I watched him from the window and felt neither triumph nor pity. I felt the quiet understanding of someone who had taken the long view and finally placed a piece on the board that could not be taken back. Ethan slept soundly, tucked in with his blanket. In the morning, he would ask if Dad had lost his job, and I would tell him the truth in language he could understand. I would tell him that sometimes adults make terrible choices and that we pick up the pieces and keep going. The trap had been set. The first wave had hit. Daniel was reeling, cornered by his own choices and by laws and people who would not look away. I knew there would be counters and lawyers and pain. I also knew he would not go quietly. But for the first time in months, I slept without that particular ache of waiting. I woke with a plan, and the plan had teeth. This was the point where the game changed. He had been the one who walked away. Now he was the one who had to face what he had left behind. Chapter by chapter, I would unfold the rest. Daniel didn't crumble right away. Men like him never do. They claw, they scramble, they bluff. They tell themselves the world still believes them, even when the world is already shifting its gaze. The Monday after the brunch, I got the first of his late-night calls. My phone lit up with his name at 11:42 p.m. I let it ring until voicemail caught him, then listened to the jagged message he left. "Lauren, this is insane. You blindsided me in front of clients, our friends. Do you have any idea what you've done to my career? Look, let's just talk. We don't need lawyers involved. We can work this out between us, please, for Ethan." I replayed it twice. He was angry, but underneath it there was panic, the kind you can't fake. By Tuesday, the fallout had started to show. Word spread fast in our small city. People whispered at school pickup. I noticed how the PTA moms glanced at me with something that wasn't pity, wasn't judgment either. It was respect. Like they'd all been waiting for someone to do what I'd just done. Marissa called midweek with an update. His company's internal audit is underway. They've already flagged discrepancies in his expense reports. If they find out he used corporate funds for personal trips, he could lose more than his job. I let that sink in. Not because I wanted him unemployed. Truthfully, I wanted him to have something left to lose. But because it meant the noose was tightening without me having to lift another finger. Meanwhile, I started putting my own life in order. I set up a new bank account solely in my name. I enrolled Ethan in an after-school art class he'd been begging to try. I bought a sturdy lockbox for important documents. These weren't just chores. They were the foundation of a life Daniel could no longer touch. On Thursday, I saw him at the grocery store. He spotted me near the dairy aisle and marched over, his jaw tight. His suit rumpled in a way it never used to be. "You've made your point," he hissed, keeping his voice low so the older couple by the milk wouldn't hear. "Enough is enough. You think you're the only one who can play games? I'll fight you on custody. I'll fight you on the house. You won't win." I looked at him, really looked at him. His tie was loose. His eyes had that wild sheen of someone who hadn't been sleeping. For the first time in years, he looked small to me. "You already lost, Daniel," I said calmly. "You just don't realize it yet." He laughed, a bitter little sound, and stormed off without his cart. By Friday, Marissa sent me a text that made my hands shake. "Got confirmation HR suspended him without pay. He's on mandatory leave pending investigation. This is moving faster than I expected." I put my phone down and stared out the window at Ethan drawing on the porch with chalk. A week ago, my son's father was the man everyone trusted, the golden husband, the charming neighbor. Now he was unraveling in plain sight, thread by thread. And this was just the beginning. The trap was working exactly as I'd designed. But I knew Daniel. Cornered animals don't just lie down. They lash out, and I was ready for it. The storm broke on a Saturday evening. Ethan was at my sister's house for a sleepover, and the quiet in my home felt sharp, expectant. I was halfway through folding laundry when headlights flared through the blinds. A car door slammed, and then came the pounding on my front door. I didn't have to look to know it was Daniel. I let him pound, for a full minute before opening the door just enough to see his face. His eyes were bloodshot, his tie gone, his shirt wrinkled like he'd been living in it for days. "Let me in," he snapped. "We're not doing this in front of the whole damn neighborhood." I kept my hand firm on the door. "You shouldn't be here." He shoved it open anyway, stumbling inside like a man too far gone to care. The stench of whiskey hit me, sharp and heavy. "You think you've won?" he sneered. "You think parading my mistakes in front of everyone makes you some kind of saint? You ruined me, Lauren. But I swear to God, if you try to take Ethan away from me, I will burn this whole thing to the ground." His words were slurred, but his rage was real. He was trembling, his hands balled into fists. I didn't flinch. Instead, I stepped back just enough so he could see the tiny red light blinking on the mantel. The camera I'd set up earlier was recording everything. Daniel froze. His eyes darted to it, then back to me. "What the hell is that?" "My insurance," I said softly. "Every threat, every word. You just handed it to me on a silver platter." For the first time that night, I saw it click in his eyes. The realization, the trap wasn't just gossip or an audit or a social bruise. This was the nail in his coffin. His own rage had become the evidence that would strip him of custody, credibility, everything he had left. He staggered back, suddenly aware of how far he'd fallen. "You wouldn't—" "I would," I cut in. "For Ethan, for me. For every lie you told while I was cleaning up the mess you left behind." The fight drained out of him in slow, uneven breaths. He muttered something I couldn't catch and stumbled toward the door, slamming it behind him. I stood there in the quiet, my chest heaving, not from fear, but from relief, because it was over. 2 weeks later, The investigation at his company concluded. Termination. His name was blacklisted in the industry. The footage from that night, shared discreetly with my lawyer, sealed the custody arrangement. Ethan would stay with me, safe, while Daniel's visits were restricted and supervised. The man who once believed he could control everything, me, our son, even the narrative of his own betrayal, was reduced to whispers and warnings. And I rebuilt. Not fast, not perfectly, but with a kind of strength I didn't know I had until he pushed me to find it. In the end, Daniel thought moving to Barcelona with a mistress was the cruelest wound he could give me. He was wrong, because nothing cuts deeper than a woman who refuses to stay broken, who learns instead how to make her revenge the sharpest blade. And mine had left him bleeding in every way that mattered.